I'd like to tell you a story about God. June 22nd, 1986. England and Argentina are deadlocked in a life-or-death grudge match for a spot in the World Cup semi-finals. And when I say life or death, I mean it. Soccer is everything for these two nations, as Bill Shankly once said. Some people believe football is a matter of life and death. I am very disappointed with that attitude. I can assure you it is much, much more important than that. In the 58th minute of the match, Argentina brings the ball forward into the final third. It pinballs around several English defenders before popping up in the air. England's goalkeeper leaps for it, arms outstretched. Diego Maradona goes for it too, and slaps the ball out of the keeper's hands and into the back of the net. For those unfamiliar with soccer, you aren't supposed to do that. You can't do that. Yet, the referee, to the English players' horror, swallows his whistle. Their frantic protestations fall on deaf ears. As Maradona wheeled away, seeing that his infraction would not be called, seeing the rows and rows of screaming fans, and his excited teammates streaking towards him, what do you think he felt in that moment? He had just broken all the rules and gotten away with it on the biggest possible stage where the stakes could not be any higher. He had just irreversibly altered the course of history and cemented himself as an icon, a literal figure of worship. Do you think in that moment he felt as though he could actually shift heaven and earth? Do you think he felt like a god? This moment would live on infamously as the hand of God, the most controversial goal ever scored, the ascendancy of a man to a god. I've actually been thinking a lot about God recently and about control and power in general. Full disclosure, I am currently semi-hospitalized because of mental health stuff, which has most certainly slowed down my video output but not quelled it entirely. Nothing can stop me from yammering on about media featuring classic religious iconography. So today, we are looking at 3 wildly different depictions of God, although they are all wild nonetheless. And none more so than the 1974 film Zardoz, starring Sean Connery. But before we get into all of that, I do need to give a quick spoiler warning for all the different media that I will be spoiling in this video. As always, I have time-stamped when I will be yapping about what, and there is a full index in the description of all featured media, which does include the music used, and on that note, there is a playlist available on the channel of all the music I've ever used in my videos, and if you have enjoyed any of those, or this one, feel more than free, feel encouraged to like, comment, subscribe, and or to support me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can have your name shouted out at the end of every future video and gain access to a growing library of shorter videos plus whatever else I feel like putting on there. But anyways, anyhow, here is a quick spoiler warning. For the audio-only crowd, I will be spoiling Zardoz, Squirrel Stapler, and the Little Green God of Agony. Also, I do apologize that the footage of Pancake that you're seeing right now is older, reused, but I couldn't take her with me to the mental health treatment facility, so we've been apart for a while, but my wife has been sending me updates, and Pancake, aside from acting out on walks, apparently, is doing just fine, as am I also, by the way. Or, well, I was, until I made the mistake of watching Zardoz on a public television in a crowded room.
The gun is good.
The gun is good!
The penis is evil. The penis shoots seeds.
I just didn't have a good idea of what this movie was. I thought it was going to be a cheesy sci-fi action adventure, and it is very so much not that.
You have penetrated me.
Zardoz is one of the wildest movies you will ever see. It is batshit crazy, start to finish. And its depiction of God is no exception, but frankly, I sort of don't know how to describe what God is in this movie or where I should start. I can't just hit you with it because it wouldn't make any sense at all out of context with the rest of the film. But also, I fear if I do go ahead and synopsize the movie, it'll still sound like nonsensical gibberish. And that's because Zardoz is just like that. It's plotted like a Mad Lib. It's absolutely outrageous. So I am going to recap it real quick, mostly for my own amusement, and also so that y'all know, I'm not just making stuff up about this movie. It does really need to be seen to be believed. Zardoz begins with an exposition dump delivered by the floating head of a character named Arthur Frayne. This opening actually had me kind of tripping because I had just watched House on Haunted Hill the literal day before, which opens the exact same way.
I'm Frederick Lauren, and I've rented the house on Haunted Hill tonight so that my wife can give a party. A haunted house party. She's so amusing.
Writer-director John Boorman was forced to include this little monologue by the studio who hoped it would help make the film easier to understand. And it achieves that goal in retrospect, but the way it's sort of just awkwardly stapled to the beginning of the movie raises more questions than answers for a first-time viewer. A title card informs us that the year is 2293, and we are then introduced to Zardoz, who appears in the form of a giant angry-looking floating stone head. He preaches to his followers, a group of scantily clad men called exterminators, and then vomits up an arsenal of firearms for them to use in their ongoing massacre of the Brutals, who are normal, mortal farmers and whatnot who serve an immortal group of people called the Eternals, who all live in this place called the Vortex, which is like a big fancy estate. There's like a mansion and gardens and stuff like that. Inside of Zardoz's mouth, Sean Connery emerges from a pile of grain and spots Arthur Frayne, who he promptly shoots. Arthur then flies away for some reason, and Sean Connery escapes into the Vortex, where the Eternals use their special mind powers to capture him and interrogate him in this big room that is decorated with naked people, where his memories can be watched on this like big screen. At first, the Eternals' goal is to find out what happened to Arthur Frayne, but they lose interest in that endeavor pretty quick and instead decide to make Sean Connery their slave for a little while. Then one of them talks backwards, which makes everyone laugh for some reason. And then Sean Connery is introduced to a group of people called apathetics, who are basically zombies. But who cares about them? Because now it is time for the Eternals to solve one of life's greatest mysteries. The mystery of the boner. And no, you did not mishear me. The Eternals, who are all flaccid, which is the correct pronunciation of that word, by the way.
In fact, what I think I'm seeing is the human equivalent of a flaccid penis.
Flaccid. It's actually pronounced flaccid. Not a lot of people know that.
And also sexless, I guess. They don't know about the birds and the bees. That's all quite the enigma to them. So they throw on some aphrodisiacal videos for Sean Connery to watch, and then they all stare at his crotch for a little bit, and then they use their special mind powers to all meditate together. But this one guy crashes out over this and is cast out of their society. He is also, and this is probably the coolest part of the movie for me, he is also aged as a punishment. So the Eternals are all immortal, but they can still be aged, so now this dude is forced to be elderly forever, which is a pretty neat idea. You can make a whole story or whatnot centered on an immortal society where the penalty for breaking the law is being aged. But anyway, Sean Connery visits the outcasts and meets the guy who invented the tabernacle, which is a big diamond that is also some sort of artificial intelligence, which is what enables the Eternals to be immortal. Plus, it's the source of their psychological powers. Sean Connery realizes that his destiny is to destroy the tabernacle. He has been bred for this purpose, and all the events of his life have been calculated and manipulated by Arthur Frayne, who is Zardoz. Arthur Frayne is part of a group of Eternals who want to die, who are tired of this aimless, immortal existence. So he created Zardoz and all that jazz with the end goal of bioengineering someone who could destroy the tabernacle. He also sort of taught Sean Connery how to read, which is where the second coolest part of this movie comes in. Sean Connery reads The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the novel by Frank Baum. Zardoz, Oz. Reading the book enables him to realize that Zardoz is a fake god and should be destroyed. And yeah, I really like this reveal. I think it's actually pretty thematically interesting. So after realizing Zardoz is all bogus, Sean Connery hides in a pile of grain and shoots Arthur Frayne, and that's what was up with all that. Most of the Eternals then embark on a manhunt for Sean Connery, who hides amongst the apathetics, who all find him so sexy that they all start to awaken from their malaise and attempt an orgy with him. But he runs away into the woods where the outcasts find him and utilize the power of drag to sneak him back into the mansion. His pals then use their mind powers to share all of their knowledge with him. So now he's not just the apparent hottest man alive, but super smart too. Charlotte Rampling is in this movie too, by the way. She's like the main Eternal lady, and she tries to kill Sean Connery, but changes her mind at the last second and decides that she'd rather just bang him instead, I guess. And then Sean Connery enters into a telepathic battle with the Tabernacle, which he wins, allowing him to have power over the tabernacle now, I think, and he can make time go backwards now and allow people to die, so all the Eternals are now mortal. All the other exterminators show up and start killing everyone while Sean Connery and Charlotte Rampling escape to a cave, and I guess they become lifelong cave dwellers afterwards, because the film ends with this crazy little montage of time passing. We see them have a kid, said kid grow up and leave, and then the pair of them grow old and die and turn into skeletons. And yeah, that's the end. That's Zardoz. It should come as no shock that John Boorman was higher than a kite during the film's production, which was pretty chaotic all around. An extra dressed as a baboon was attacked by a real baboon. They went so hard on the smoke machines that it ruined a bunch of the film prints. They shot the movie in Ireland in the 70s, so the IRA was like a major worry, as were STDs on the set, which was described as a pretty hedonistic environment. They had to reshoot that ending montage like 3 times, which angered Sean Connery so much that he had to be restrained by several production assistants. It was also very difficult to get him to cross-dress for that one scene, and unfortunately, none of this contributed to the betterment of the project, because the movie was a massive flop. Film critic Ian Christie wrote that, "If this is intellectual thinking, then Donald Duck deserves the Nobel Prize." I will say that if this was released today with the A24 logo slapped on top of it, I think people would go crazy for this thing. But in general, I do really appreciate how wild and wacky the movie is. And you know, I'm always up for a good depiction of a false god. That's one of the reasons why I enjoyed the Blasphemous games so much. Zardoz's appearance was inspired by Belgian surrealist painter René Magritte's The Castle of the Pyrenees, which depicts a giant floating stone castle. Zardoz does also just look very cool. A big scary stone angry flying face in the sky is a very striking image. The effects work behind it is also really solid, and the thematic connection to the Wizard of Oz, Zardoz being just like a giant mask, really, like how Oz first appears to Dorothy, is Clever probably isn't the right word for it, but it is most certainly intriguing. In a film that is mostly filled with nonsensical pseudo-intellectual gibberish, Zardoz's connection to the wonderful Wizard of Oz is something to latch onto. It is a compelling plot point, and helps to make this a pretty cool depiction of a god, even if it is revealed to be a fake one. Hey, it's me from Beyond the Edit, and back home, Pancake and I are reunited at last. I was honestly kind of worried that she might not, recognize or remember me, but she did. She was very excited to see me, and I was very, very happy about that. She's got the memory of a goldfish. Actually, no, that's bad, right? No, what's the good one's elephant. Elephants have good memories, right? She's got the memory of an elephant, I think. So before we begin this next segment, I do need to give a short, minor content warning. So this video was cobbled together over the last couple of months under some very different and difficult circumstances. So for one thing, I do apologize for the varying levels in audio quality. But also, I made each of these while I was in very different headspaces. So this next segment was made at a very low point in my treatment and recovery. I was feeling a lot of anger and despair, and I was meeting a lot of new people who had been very adversely affected by the actions of and decisions made by some of our lawmakers and oligarchs. So FYI, this is a little bit more intense than my usual output, and there is some real life footage included as well, and if that's not your jam, that is perfectly fine. Feel free to skip past this part or just dip entirely, but be wary. If you do that, you might make Pancakes sad. Squirrel Stapler is a silly little game where you shoot squirrels, staple them to your dead wife's corpse, and meet God. Developed in just 10 days by David Szymanski as part of the Dread X Collection 2, Squirrel Stapler is one part parody of PS2 era hunting games, if not maybe just low effort shovelware type stuff in general, one part slow burn psychological horror, and one part overwhelming existential fever dream. The gameplay loop is simple. Each day in the game, you leave your cabin, hunt 5 squirrels, collect their carcasses, return to your cabin, and staple them to what's left of your special lady friend. You've got a map, a score tally, a noise meter, a visibility meter, and a gun. Later in the game, you also have to contend with these big squirrel bears that blow up when they get too close to you. Squirrel ghosts can also chase you around and deal damage. There are ammunition refills, speed and health bonuses that you collect along the way, plus these little documents that provide you with squirrel facts, tips, and snippets of esoteric storytelling, which come in the form of field reports, prose, and Bible verses. Not real Bible verses though, to be clear. The first one you find reads, Book of the Grove, chapter 6, verse 1. Saith the goat of the wood, thou shalt not staple squirrels. You are also informed via bloody writing on the wall of your cabin that, in 5 days, God is coming. Similar red text at the beginning of the game provides a little bit of context for the player's character and said character's motivations. We came here to get away from it all so that our love might blossom. But our love has not blossomed. Look in my beloved. The flies have made her ugly and rotten. I wish she were beautiful like the squirrels of the wood. And so I will cover her in the squirrels of the wood. On day 2, you are somehow left a note by your wife, which reads, "I don't want squirrels, I want skin. Give me back my skin, or give me yours instead." On day 3, she somehow migrates to a different room in the cabin, and on day 4, she even appears before you out in the woods. At the end of each of these days, when you sleep, you are greeted by this very lovely, very low-res image of a squirrel, as you are also when you visit the Sin Shack. Committing non-specific sins in the shack actually boosts your score. On day 5, red text informs you that God is coming today, as was foretold earlier. Once you finish hunting squirrels, a countdown to God's appearance begins. You are locked out of your cabin and serenaded with the overpowering caroling of what I can only assume to be the collective chorus of every squirrel you have sent to squirrel heaven. This finale is panic attack inducing. It is a thunderous crescendo and startling climax to what has mostly been a tranquil experience up to this point. Yes, the game has been strange and eerie at points, but it hasn't been hostile up until this finale. Squirrel Stapler's climax is an all-out assault on the senses. It is a righteous vengeance carried out by an angry god, where the player's character is resoundingly punished for his sins. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the idea of hell or some kind of divine judgment is, to me, a nice thought, especially when it seems that here in the quote-unquote real world, that all you need to escape punishment for even the most heinous crimes imaginable is just a little bit of power or money. Squirrel Stapler's god, who is perhaps god of the squirrels or some kind of higher power related to nature maybe, is also actually neither of those things. The game simply defines it as God. This is God. Behold, for your lord is a giant, floating, disembodied, crazy-looking demon squirrel head thing. Although this god could also be technically the goat of the wood mentioned earlier in the Book of the Grove, what God's design here literally is 2 low-res squirrel images stapled together, plus what I think is a cat mouth dropped on top. Interestingly, God also spawns into the game the moment you exit the cabin for the first time, and is tucked away underneath the map right below the cabin. Once that timer begins on day 5, God teleports from his hiding place to the player and sticks onto your back like a leech. Only once the timer ends does it uncouple itself, ready to scare the absolute shit out of you. I have no problem admitting that when I first played the game, probably about a year or so ago, I jumped like 2 full feet into the air. It is a perfectly executed jump scare, and while yes, it is very surprising, it is no surprise that it is so well done. David Szymanski is most famous for developing the game Iron Lung, which features a similar moment, also rendered with expert timing. All of Szymanski's games, for that matter, are wonderfully atmospheric and pull off some really engaging world building with a minimalist flair. He is able to do so much with so very little. It's really cool, and all the excerpts from the Book of the Grove are very well written. I also mentioned earlier that you can find these squirrel facts, I'm no expert. I'm not a squirrelologist by any means, but I can't help but wonder if they aren't altogether true. The prose I referenced earlier comes in the form of a short story entitled The Lady, which tells the tale of a lonely artist who purchases a fine paintbrush whose bristles are made from the hair of a beautiful woman, The artist paints a portrait of what he believes she might look like, but once he learns that the paintbrush's bristles were actually made from the hair of a wild boar, he becomes inconsolable. Shortly after, he meets an old woman who offers to cast a spell which would bring the woman he painted to life. He gladly accepts this proposal, but quickly regrets his decision when he realizes that he only painted the woman from the waist up. She comes to life, but quickly dies horrifically due to being halved.
This was a particularly bad case of somebody being cut in half. I was not able to reattach the top half of his body to the bottom half of his body.
Speak English, Doc. We ain't scientists.
The artist actually kills her with an axe as an act of mercy, but anyways, he and the old woman then make stew out of the remains. But the stew turns out to be poisonous, so they both die. Art will eventually destroy the artist. The end. While I do like how playful and funnily sudden the ending to The Lady is, I also think it does sort of cheapen the piece as a whole, and I don't really understand how it fits in with the rest of the game. It may not be intended to at all, or perhaps the player's character is the artist and the woman he painted is supposed to represent his dead wife, who he may or may not have also killed. I've seen a lot of people theorize about how all these different strands connect together, and while I do believe that this game is laced with meaning, I don't think that there is a unifying theme or narrative. I don't think the lady, the field reports, the squirrel facts, and whatnot are all pieces of a puzzle for us to just put together. To me, the game seems to be purposely incongruous, but not thoughtless, just abstract as the cosmic squirrel god who arrives to punish you for your sins, who arrives to punish you for all of our sins. Surely Stephen King is the most influential, if not most popular, horror writer of all time. I mean, you could maybe make an argument for Poe, maybe Lovecraft, or Stoker, Barker, or Mary Shelley maybe, or R.L. Stine.
I start off each day with a nice bowl of Cheerios because they're just as cheery as me. Cheerios look like little mouths, so sometimes for extra fun, I'll add googly eyes to complete the face.
But I don't think anyone really comes all that close to matching just how large King's bibliography is.
Let me tell you something about Steve King. Steve King wishes he could write like me, and I've sold way more books than him, but nobody ever talks about that!
Okay.
Way more books!
And how many of those works are iconic? But forget Pet Semetary, Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Stand, The Mist, Misery, Thinner, Christine, Carrie, Cujo, It. Largely forgotten and tucked away inside of Stephen Jones's 2011 short story collection, A Book of Horrors, lies one of my all-time favorite Stephen King stories, a short tale entitled The Little Green God of
Agony, oh, the torture they teach.
Here's a misconception I had. I thought that King's 1987 novel Misery was written as a response to or was inspired by a real-life car accident that he had suffered and that had left him badly injured. But in fact, that real-life car accident in which a distracted driver swerved off the road and hit him, collapsing one of his lungs, breaking his hip, and shattering his right leg would not transpire until 1999. The Little Green God of Agony is actually that story born from the survival of a harrowing near-death incident. In a 2015 reprint of the short story, along with 20 or so others collected in a compilation entitled The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, King would write that, during those long months spent recovering some range of movement in my right leg and then learning to walk again, I had plenty of time to reflect on what some philosophers have called the problem of pain. This story is about that, and I wrote it years later when the worst of my own pain had receded to a steady, low mutter. Like several other stories in this book, The Little Green God of Agony is a search for closure. taking place entirely in the bedroom of the 6th richest man in the world, an appropriately curmudgeonous and rude man named Andy Newsom. The little green god of agony is a focused and uncomplicated tale of pain and suffering. 2 years prior, Newsom survived a plane crash, and the injuries he sustained from that event have left him bedridden with severe, unbearable chronic pain. His nurse, Kat McDonald, who privately believes that he is too much of a wuss to overcome his condition, keeps her mouth shut because she is being paid a lot of money. A priest named Rideout shows up and tells Newsom that his pain is being caused by a demon god which has been living inside of him and feeding off of his suffering. He offers to expel this malignant evil in exchange for 750 grand, which he would use to rebuild his church. Newsom agrees to this, which irritates Kat so much that she berates him for like 2 full pages. In summary, she calls him a lazy coward and a stupid fool, which gets her fired. But Rideout insists that she not be and remain to witness the exorcism, so that she can learn a little compassion. Rideout then performs the expulsion, and lo and behold, the little green god of agony forces its way out of Newsom via his mouth. And it's described as like, I was picturing like one of those rubbery ball, hair ball toys. I don't know what those are called, but I will look it up later and then record myself saying the actual name of that toy and then run that through Audacity before inserting that snippet right here. It's called a cush ball. I don't know why I couldn't have just Googled that when I recorded this in the first place. I don't know why I did that, but what then transpires is a scene of total chaos. There is a storm outside, which has grown so unruly that it sends a tree cascading through the window and into the room. The power goes out. Rideout suffers a fatal heart attack. There are a handful of other characters present, by the way, who don't really matter. There's a housekeeper. There's this one guy who accidentally pepper sprays himself at this juncture, and then the little green god of agony crawls onto the housekeeper's face, which causes her severe searing pain, which only ends once Kat swats it with a broom and stomps on it like a bug. Newsom, who's kind of off in his own little world, announces that he is feeling much better. Kat feels something, presumably the little green god of agony, crawl onto the back of her hand, and that's it. That is the end. I am well aware that our lovable little green demon god isn't the god, our Father who art in heaven, but is a minor god, keyword god. So I think it fits with the theme of this video, even if loosely, but also Zardoz isn't capital G god either. So when Rideout is making his pitch to Newsom, he tells him that there are many gods. The fact that our Lord, the Lord God of hosts, rules them all, and on the day of judgment will destroy them all, does not change that. These little gods have been worshipped by people both ancient and modern. They have their powers, and our God sometimes allows those powers to be exercised. I love the idea of lesser gods. I love the idea of there being some kind of god of agony, of pain, which is such a controlling thing to experience and feel. We can pretty much all agree that pain sucks. A sizable chunk of our lives is motivated by the want to avoid suffering, to evade anything that could cause harm. In that way, the overwhelming fear of agony and the experience of suffering itself governs a lot of our actions, and it does kind of have power over us, like some sort of god. I am a little bit more familiar with what I would describe as Thinky pain, to quote Marc Maron, or the suffering that comes from mental illness than I am suffering that comes from like falling off a horse and breaking your arm in 3 different places or something like that. Although I was in a nasty little car accident last year which fractured my finger, and that really hurt bad. I would do some very not flattering things to avoid having to experience that pain again, and in that way, the little green god of agony does have some power over me, as it does all of y'all, which makes absolutely no sense to say. Saying all of y'all completely defeats the point of contracting the phrase you all into y'all. I've only made it longer by saying that and a more laborious expression. And, you know, in that way, I am my own little god of agony. I, like many of y'all, probably don't make things easy for myself. It's hard to be a functioning adult when you're plagued by self-destructive compulsions and obsessions, but also, I think that I'm gonna figure it out and squash that little god of agony. I didn't feel that way yesterday at all, but I do today, and I hope that it lasts. If it does, you're probably watching this video on YouTube right now. And if it doesn't, then you're not. You don't even exist, because I never finished this video and uploaded it. So if you are watching, and if today marked the day that I began to overcome that little god of agony, then that means that day will surely come for you too. Who knows? It could even be today. Thank y'all so much for watching. It's really nice and great to be able to know that I have this channel and y'all's support to fall back on or rely on a little bit during what, you know, has been a really difficult time in my life. So yeah, thanks a bunch. Shout out Rubber Room, and extra special thanks and shout out to all of my patrons. Dissection 39, Knoll Productions, Aces 1290, Levi Barnett, Barbecutie, Cooper Jones, Biggest, Brickus, Avi, BAAM, Brandon, or Bam, Brandon, Chaluli, Alex, 1A, I'm not gonna say all the numbers, Alex, Ubava, Katie Lobombard, Ethan, Jay Azite, Braden Surfos, Joy Barnett, Nina Verkowski, Curbing, Sean C, Addison S, Martha Barnett, Drew K, Muffin, Totally Awesome, and Lance B.